I would say both. And I just love what the previous speakers have said. And particularly right now, what Brandon has shared. Deacon Brandon, right, Brandon? Is this?
Yes, Deacon. He's Deacon Brandon. Yes.
I'm sure he's been called worse things than just Brandon. I'm just pulling your chain, Brandon. So I love that Brandon has formulated it as both judgment and hope. I think that it's definitely a cleansing kind of an experience, and it brings to the fore certain things that, as usual, history being an imperfect and human reality, and the church indeed being a divine human, body, as we all know. I think that neglecting that part of the humanity and also the historical changeable reality has led to definitely, forgive me, I don't remember who amongst the speakers already said this, but there is a misunderstanding about the vulnerability of the physical and indeed those sacred species that God willed it, to use in order to offer us communion with him. But on a deeper level, I think that besides the misunderstanding and the bad catechetical instruction in sacramental theology, that we're reaping the results of, because, in the vacuum that the poor understanding of liturgy creates, in the vacuum also of almost zero participation of the laity, and anyway, in a lot of the Orthodox churches, not all of them. In that vacuum, there's the resulting Eucharist only, and specifically that part of the Eucharist where you get something. And the consumerist attitude of the laity coming, also one can add, there's been an infantilization of the laity to the point where they are not accustomed to accepting responsibility for worship. There's, a neglect also of any service other than the divine liturgy, as if it's no secret to anyone that Matins is only there for the several fanatics who, are showing up, and there's one or two, for some reason, showing up and standing there in the pews. Vespers, oftentimes not served at all at many parishes. And the actual vision of what Holy Communion is, that culmination of going through those services, entering into the mystery of the feast, and then indeed partaking of the table. But now it seems that, as Father David has pointed out, this, also, I guess, that priests slip into this, that they can only, into this practice of reaching the faithful only through the Eucharist. But I would also, and I've seen in my own little activity, in discussing these issues and in getting questions about these issues, I would also see this in a hopeful light, that, in that very chapter of 1 Corinthians, chapter 11, where we have the earliest narrative about the mystical supper of St. Paul, in that very chapter is the famous phrase, in 1 Corinthians 19, that there must be divisions amongst us, that the tested, or the dokimi, be made manifest. So I would think that the way we react to the present scandal, I would say the scandal of the liturgical spoon, because it's a stumbling block on both sides of the issue. I think that having some patience, like hypomone, remaining behind sometimes, waiting this one out, and having some patience with allowing ourselves to be tested and not jumping the gun, and also allowing church authority to be doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's not right for each of the faithful to have to decide this and prove his or her faith, or apparently lack thereof, because it seems to be on them. Brandon touched upon that this is an ecclesiological test. And, I won't be the first one to notice that we have been for many, I would say, centuries in a situation of crisis of church authority, the inability actually to come together as, for a pan-Orthodox council, even the last attempt to do so, for there to be a sidestepping of the actually most contested issues, not touching upon something like calendar or divorce. I don't know if, and I'm familiar with the wonderful new document for the life of the world. However, the actual inability and the paralysis of church authority, because you see, I think a lot of the hierarchs would be completely on board with doing the responsible thing, because whatever you want to say about the issue at hand, there is a responsibility of the church authorities before the civil authorities. It's very hard to imagine, with not only with the present day restrictions, but the aftermath of this, of how the civil authorities will approach an entire community or cathedral that might not have a kind of custom that will be perceived, regardless of how the faithful perceive this, that will perceive with no problems the custom of a common spoon. And hierarchs do have to think about that. But, the appeal to either the presence of a precedent in tradition or a lack thereof is overlooking the fact that church authority in the Orthodox Church has compromised in the way sacraments are done. If I name the example of ordination, for centuries, the 30th canon of the Holy Apostles about it being strictly prohibited to involve civil authority in ordination in the election process. And if we're not entirely innocent of church history, not only in Byzantium was that not the case, that civil authorities were not systemically involved, very much involved. And nobody said that ordination somehow or the actual sacrament was violated. I mean, maybe there were voices now and then, and, in later discussions of Sergianism and far more recent discussions of, certain church-state relations that are problematic. This has, been concern about it has been voiced. Nonetheless, that imperfect reality of church history, a lot of it is swallowed just by the humble carrying of the cross of history. So I'll finish now, but I think that this is a crisis of church authority and ultimately a faith in the church, a church that experienced robust change, especially, I would say, in the liturgy. The liturgy, and even specifically the way Holy Communion has been distributed, is really experienced robust change. So the fact that we don't believe that the church has the authority, and, where the rubber hits the road, it is on the level of hierarchical decision. The fact that actually there is a fear, I think, amongst the hierarchy, and one hears this a lot, like in high placed, like church commissions. I hear this in Moscow a lot at the table in the various commissions of the intercouncil presence, both the Canon Law Commission, the Liturgical Commission. Oh, if we say this, there'll be schism. So it's not that amongst the decision makers there wouldn't be total agreement that something has to be modified, but the fear and the tail wagging the dog here a lot of the times, and I think sometimes being in denial as to it's our responsibility. The pastors have failed, the teachers have failed to instruct properly in these things. And, you know, because of this, there is a deep also mistrust of church authority. But ultimately, it's that the church of today, it's what Filarovsky would call also, it's tied to the theology of demise, that, you know, there was a golden age when the church legislated, when the church got together for councils, and then, I don't know, at the latest, you know, the year Gregory Palamas died, or maybe when John of Damascus died, you choose your endpoint, but everything started going to hell in a handbasket, and we just have to repeat, you know, what was done before that cutoff point. So I think taking it a notch down, remembering this, that there must be divisions amongst us, that we be able to be manifested as those who are not only tested, but hence reliable, is something to hold on to and to try, you know, in humility to trust that the Holy Spirit will guide the church in this.